Right, guys. So, how can Newcastle defeat the high-flying Spurs this Saturday at St James's Park? I'm going to kick off things with a roadmap to victory, with a very simple but yet effective tactical analysis. What I think will be the key tactical analysis for this game and for this match. And it's going to be really simple. It's going to be an A, B, C situation, and you're going to be like, it's going to explain why I think the lineups will be what they are, what the form is going to explain, all these things. So essentially, the main threat I think that will come from Tottenham in this game is how they essentially overload their wings. I saw it against the Nottingham Forest, who I think over a period of time were just they were just grounded down by Tottenham, who pressed the life out of them and took advantage. And it's them overloading these wings and doing the cutbacks that really, really, really hurt Forest. Other teams, and we'll talk about it a bit more, did really well in terms of adapting and addressing this. So this is a graphic of, and it's provided by, I forgot the gentleman's name. I put it in my description. I'll say it's there. Said Hanas, tactical analysis of how a team can defend against overlapping fullbacks, and essentially, obviously, what I think will happen is, you guys know, Tottenham play with real high press. You're going to have, because they've got Vicario, who's a sweeper keeper, very similar to Pope, will push them right up. Sometimes Tottenham push so high up, it's only Romero and Van de Ven who are in the back line there. They're just a slightly bit more reserved when they're away from home, but the principle is still the same. They push up their fullbacks and Poro on one side, Udoji on the other side, really push up with their left wing forwards, with Brendan Johnson on one side and Werner on the other. And you can imagine on this side, you'll have Udoji and you'll have Werner on this side. Udoji as number one in orange, and Udoji as number two in orange, and maybe Werner here as number one, against Kraft on this side and Shaw. And what you know in terms of just being able to defend against the fullback, this side, I think Kraft will be very key in essentially ensuring that when Werner has the ball, he doesn't let Werner get into that any closer into that danger space where either Werner can go past him and create havoc going into the area, or set his body position in such where the overlapping run comes and he's not able to block that. So he has to be able to delay Werner as long as possible to allow reinforcements to come in. The back line, as you guys see it, is a little bit staggered. It's not going to be straight. And this is where Shaw is going to be looking out for either the overlapping run or holding his position, especially waiting for the guys, our fullbacks, our midfielders to come back, in which case probably be shown Longstaff, in order to be able to prepare, to defend against not a cutback, but to defend against Kraft being taken out by Werner, and Werner cutting into the area. So this is the third stage. Kraft's main aim is going to be to hold Werner and to keep him there as long as possible until they find safety. So this is against next stage, where there's now decision making process about to happen. Is the pass to Udoji going to happen or not? And can Kraft hold again Werner and keep him indecisive as long as possible? So in this case, Werner decides to pass the ball. However, because Kraft has been able to hold him as long as possible. When Udoji does eventually come, Kraft is able to keep him from overlapping and getting that cut back in. It's very, very simple. I'm explaining what I'm doing, but this is exactly what Tottenham successfully were able to do against Nottingham Forest, and then got that 3-1 victory. So Kraft is now able to follow the overlapping runner. Shaw is able to now either decide to approach Werner or stay where he is, as Kraft is dealing with Udoji. And essentially, Udogie hopefully decides not to try and get to the byline because he can't get past Kraft and passes it back to Werner. By the time which Werner gets the ball, his choices are limited. There's no point in passing it. The attack dies down. He passes back to Udogie. Kraft is there. He has to recycle the ball back into the midfield as hopefully by that time Sean Longstaff and everybody else is back. You're saying now, Philip. So you've explained all of that. You know what is all this about? Here is what if Newcastle are able to. I'm gonna show the average positioning of Tottenham, West Ham, and I'm gonna say this: if Newcastle are able to stunt the attacking options of Spurs for longer periods of the game, get them to run out of ideas and then we're able to more focus on our attacks, it helps us to win this game. Now, why I've got to focus on the Tottenham West Ham game? In fact, let me first go to the Tottenham Nottingham Forest game and where I think Nottingham Forest went wrong. Nottingham Forest did what they could in terms of they chose a very counter-attacking style. Obviously, they got good runners on the pitch. Morgan Gibbs-White, a favourite of mine, Elanga, and Hudson-Odoi. And what they would do is when Tottenham would press high, they did what Forest did really well. Is as we showed earlier, they were able to stop those overlapping runs and keep those cutbacks to a minimum. What happened was for Forest though, because they were so deep, they would launch the ball forward, and either one or two things would happen. None of their runners could obviously outrun Van der Ven or Ramos, or if the ball went past Van der Ven or Ramos, Vicario, who's an exceptional sweeper keeper, was able to sweep the ball away. And so when second half hit with the depth that that Spurs have, they were able to put on Bentancur, they were able to put on Højbjerg and have a little bit more control of the midfield, and they became a little bit more methodical in their approach play, and they ground down Forest, who had very limited attacking options. And so they eventually those cutbacks, those overlapping runs really started hurting, and they eventually won the game. So having said that, we go to the West Ham game. As you guys can see from these average positions, West Ham are somewhere between, very much in the mid-block against Tottenham. And what they use is, instead of being so deep as probably is customary to West Ham, they decided to use the best form of defense as attack. So their man of the match, for instance, was Kudos, and obviously had Jarrod Bowen on the other side, and they kept on threatening for Spurs on the other side. So when Spurs are creating overlaps against West Ham on their end, West Ham were very good at using Kudus and using Jarrod Bowen as their main outlets in particular. At times also Mikel Antonio, but those guys were their main outlets and were able to hurt Spurs on the other side. Spurs also became a lot more cautious about going all out, as you guys can see, whereas against because they were really worried about the counter-attack. Whereas against Forest, they weren't. And, they only had, you guys should remember, it was only Ramos and Van der Ven that were in their own half. Everybody was on the other side. Whereas with West Ham, because West Ham presented a threat, Tottenham had to keep some players back. And so essentially, West Ham were able to keep Tottenham at bay and also were converted their chances on the other end. And the game ended 1-1. So going to the Newcastle game, we're going to share the tab right now. Going into this Newcastle game, learning from West Ham, we know that Newcastle need to do one of two things: is to be defensively sound, and I'll make it sound easy. It's not going to be easy. We know that. Newcastle are going to have to be defensively sound and do the type of things that we explained in the basics, but they're also going to have to be a continuous attacking threat against Tottenham, so that in the second half, where Tottenham actually have been most successful, especially in the last 7-8 games. I can't remember what the stats was. Apparently, Tottenham scored 12 goals in the second half and only 1 goal in the first half in the last 7 games. And you can see why. Tottenham spent time working teams out, probing. But if you do not have a successful attack like Nottingham Forest, what ends up happening is Tottenham overwhelm you, they suffocate you, they maul you to death, and those overlapping runs, your team gets tired as Forest did, and those overlapping runs become a lot more harder to be able to track, to keep the players and to limit, because they're happening at such a frequent time, and eventually the defense breaks down. They get to the byline. Those guys get to the byline. Those cutbacks happen, and then all hell breaks loose. Newcastle are going to have to defend well, but they're also going to have to sustain a threat and attack, as did West Ham. So I think Eddie Howe's approach would be to keep a mid block at home against Tottenham, and to keep a threat. Now, as you guys can see from this lineup, this is WhoScored.com. This is their predicted lineup. The main difference I have for Newcastle is I don't think Barnes starts. I think Murphy starts. And Murphy and Kraft and Longstaff are going to work together, and particularly in this first half, to keep them to ensure Newcastle don't get done by the overlap between Werner and Udogie. Gordon, Anderson, and Hall will work together to ensure that Johnson, Porro, and Højbjerg don't do the overlap. But they're so focused, as Eddie Howe will also, isn't just the defensive work. With Anderson and Hall's ability, yes, Hall is still learning his defensive duties and how to carry them out in a competent level, but Hall's also very, very good on the ball, carrying the ball and passing the ball in tight spaces, as is Anderson, who's very confident on the ball in tight spaces and passing the ball. And obviously, he's got the outlet in front of him in terms of Gordon. Newcastle will have the option that if they're able to limit or stop those overlaps, you'd see Gordon hitting those gaps up front where Spurs are. If you guys imagine Porro and Johnson are in our half trying to do the overlaps, we stop them. There's now a gap on the other side, and now Gordon can enter that side. And on the other side, the same thing will be for Murphy or Barnes, especially in the second half, where they'll get into those gaps, and either Hall or Kraft or Hall or Anderson are able to bring those either do one-time passes onto them, or as in Anderson's case, you can carry the ball with him and delay the pass until Gordon is able to get into a more threatening situation and really hurt Tottenham. So there's an opportunity. Those are the two things. There's that tension between a defense and attack that Newcastle are going to have to be able to display in that game. The main, I guess, hole in my theory is that Kraft and Hall aren't as defensively sound as we would like, as Livramento, for instance, or Trippier on the one side. And so that's going to be the difficulty. So it's going to take a real team effort. And what remember also when, for instance, Newcastle played Man City, is that we successfully were able to defend against Man City, get the ball to Gomes, and then Gordon and Isak essentially got themselves or get the ball over to Gordon and Isak, who created a 2v1, 2v2 situations against Kyle Walker and the others there, and against Diaz and others, and we're able to really hurt Man City. I think that we can do the same thing against Romero and Van de Ven, who's an exceptional defender, but he can't defend two. He can't by himself defend two players of Gordon and Isak's caliber all game in the game. And so I think there's some hope there for Newcastle in terms of what they can do, but they have to be able to stop the overlaps on the side against Tottenham. There's also the other concern is obviously the transition. The same thing that Tottenham are worried about in terms of getting caught in transition is the same thing that Newcastle will also be worried about. That if when we do counter attack and it doesn't work out, for instance, Gordon gets dispossessed by Van de Ven, and Van de Ven does a one-time pass to Maddison, Johnson, Werner, and Son get on their bikes, Newcastle become very, very vulnerable as to the attacks that way. So it's a game that is been full of goals coming into this game. People know been a lot of goals in this fixture, and I think there's going to be a lot of goals in this particular game on Saturday as well. WhoScored.com got Højbjerg and Benteke starting the game, maybe because Saab and Bissouma were both taken off at half time. I think it might be Bissouma and Benteke that starts. I think that would be their best midfield in terms of control, power, and aggression and intelligence there. So I think that would be their main hope. So the main prediction, I think, having said that, I think Tottenham come in as favourites for this game, and WhoScored.com have them as have predicted the game to finish 2-2. And I've watched other analysis as well. I think I never like backing any team against Newcastle. I think Tottenham are favourites, but in the tactical analysis that I've laid out, if Newcastle are to win, this is the roadmap I think Eddie Howe will have to keep. He would have to get the team to defend very well against the overlaps, and it'd have to be a constant threat, especially on the counter-attack or in transition, through balls through the middle, for instance, to Isak, if need be, to get him in a 1v1 situation against Van de Ven or Romero, or use Gordon and or Murphy and or Barnes in the second half to be able to do that. Otherwise, Tottenham will only increase their volume of attack, especially in the second half. And Newcastle's limited squad, tiring squad, aging squad could end up being on the receiving end of the same scoreline as Nottingham Forest have. So in order to to get a better scoreline, you have to follow almost a similar-ish blueprint to West Ham. And if Newcastle do that, I'll back them to win 2-1. But there's as I mentioned earlier, Tottenham are favourites, and the other probability of a Tottenham victory is slightly higher. But that's my view in terms of the game itself. Let me know what you guys think, guys. Send in your comments and hit that notification bell, like, and until next time, guys, as always, take care and God bless.